Hello and welcome initiative. All the proceeds from the monetization of this podcast will go to charitable causes. It's for the person that wants it. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Underdogs, Bootstrappers, and Game Changers. I get really excited when I have a friend here with me, and my friend, Judge Lynn Toler.
How are you, Tyler?
So good to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Great. And if you don't recognize Judge Lynn, then you haven't ever turned on afternoon television.
Yeah, morning and afternoons. For about 13 years, I was on television on divorce court and another 10 years on marriage boot camp.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you pretty much, anytime I'm at a hotel or something and I happen to turn on the TV and it's daytime television, I usually see you.
Yeah, and it's funny, I met Samuel L. Jackson.
Okay.
And he looked at me and he said, "I don't like your new set. I don't like your new bailiff, but I still like you." And I said, "How do you know who I am?" And he said, "Actors spend 12 hours a day in their trailers waiting to do 2 hours of work. We flip a lot of channels. I've seen you."
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So if you're bored and flipping channels, I'm there for you.
Well, and I wanted to have you on because, as you know, I have an underdog audience. Mm-hmm. And folks, just so you know, if you're new to the show, this is all for you. This is not for me. Unfortunately, not for my dear friend, the judge here. This is for you. We do this for you, and so I try to bring in a story that I think is going to help you today. And Judge Lynn has so many, and luckily she's around here and she wants to start driving over here more.
Yes, I do,
okay.
Because yes.
And so we're going to get to some today, and I'm actually going to make her come back a couple different times because, Judge, I listen to your content, I hear your content, I see the impact it has. And I think one of my things in the world is more good messaging, right? Evil has no problem using the camera. I love helping people with good voices use it too, and yours is one of them, and I see how helpful it is for people, and especially underdogs. And so today, I want to go into, because I know quite a bit about you, and so I want to go a little bit about, we're going to go historical family stuff for a little while, because I just think some of those stories are so interesting. And then we're going to go from there into some of the things that I want to talk to you about and ask you about today. But this is going to end up being multiple episodes, I'm sure. And so
I'll come back whenever you instruct me to.
Your father, for instance, we've talked a little bit about him. Really interesting guy. And I could go into a little bit, but I know you'll tell it so much better. Please tell me a little bit about your dad so the audience can.
It's funny too, and I'm glad you asked me about my dad because I wrote a book about my mother in 2007, bragging about what a tremendous emotional, how she was an emotional genius, emotional intelligence genius. She's just very good at it. But my father was just a genius on the intellectual side. He was born in 1919.
Okay.
He was the son of his father and my grandmother. My grandmother was born in 1886. She had gone to college by the time she had him.
Wow. And
she had 4 sons. My father had an IQ of 150, and he was the dumbest one. The rest of them were I always believe that what God gives you in abundance on one side, he shorts you on the other. And so he got an abundance of IQ, but emotionally that man was threadbare, as was all his brothers. And so, but he was just crazy enough not to allow the fact that he was a 5'2" black man born in the hills of West Virginia to stop him from taking over the world, which he certainly believed was his job to do. He used to work he lived in coal mining country, and he worked for the guy that owned the coal mines.
Okay.
And the guy that, when he was 13, when he was young, because he was too old, so what he would just run errands for the family. He would cook and he would buy. And he found out that the guy was an alcoholic. And so he would pay my dad to slip him drinks. liquor, and they were doing it for years. So he was getting money. He was going to the store buying their food, and with the money that he was buying food for his family. And he made him promise. He said, if I ever get caught, and he got caught when he was around 17, he said, you got to give me a job in the coal mines. And he did, because my father was their sole support. My grandfather had had a multitude of strokes.
Wow.
And he was bedridden, and, all you could do was turn him.
So he was the breadwinner at like 17.
Oh, at 13.
13.
Oh yeah, my dad, my grandfather, was much older.
Yeah.
And he had had a multitude of strokes by the time Dad was 13 years old, and his other brothers were too not together to work, so he was the one that had to do it. And then when he started college, he would do. I found this out. He never told me anything. I have to beg his friends.
Okay.
And one lady told me, he said he would do 2 weeks in the coal mine, 2 weeks in college. 2 weeks in the coal mine, 2 weeks in college. And then he got drafted and went to war and went to WW2.
Okay.
He ran an all-black unit whose job was mop-up. So he was in the Solomon Islands, and the Japanese would dig tunnels and be down there. And so after the main fighting was going, my father... They had flamethrowers on the back, and they sent them in the holes after the Japanese with flamethrowers. Wow. That was his job.
Wow.
And he received the Bronze Star. He was very, very good. And then one day, he was an officer. He went in as a lieutenant because he scored so high on the exams.
That's amazing.
He wanted to go into the officers' club, and they wouldn't let him.
Huh.
So Daddy beat the crap out of the next guy who came to the door, and they were going to send him to Leavenworth. But they had a psychiatrist examine him, and he came out saying he was manic depressive 2, which is bipolar now.
Yeah, okay.
And he got out, and on good charges, and then he took the GI Bill and went to college. And no, he had already been to college. And he took the GI Bill and went to law school in
no way.
Ohio State.
Huh.
And he became a lawyer.
Okay. Is that what made you want to go into law?
Absolutely not. I was supposed to be a doctor. My sister was supposed to be a doctor. I got to Harvard and decided it was a party school, which was clearly not the function, but I did it anyway, and I partied for 4 years, and senior year came around, and you got to have a certain amount of science and biology and grades to get in there, and I said, oh, crap, I don't have it. And I called Daddy up, and I said, he says, I don't know what you're going to do, baby, but I'm going to stop sending you money the minute you stop learning things. So figure it out. So I ran and took the LSAT, and I've always been really good at standardized testing. So I got into Penn Law, and I went just so my father wouldn't cut me off.
What'd your sister end up doing?
She's a board-certified neurologist. She did the right thing.
Oh, the right thing. So you wish you would have went into medicine.
She did the thing we were supposed to do.
Okay.
I did the thing that I had to do at the time.
Yeah.
But I always contend that I am an accidental overachiever who has failed up ass backward all her life. I didn't have the wherewithal to get the grades to get into medical school. I went to law school. I hated law school. I hated being a lawyer. I was so upset about being a lawyer. Somebody said, oh, why don't you run for judge? Which was just a crazy idea. It was, it wasn't going to work. I was 33 years old. I had 4 stepchildren in the house. Who does that kind of thing? I was the only person of my party in the community. 5-1, nobody knew who I was, and I won by 6 votes because my husband would not let me lose.
What did he do to support you?
He practically shut down his business.
Okay.
He was an accountant.
Okay.
And he's from Cleveland, which is where I was. Every friend he ever had for the 40 years that he known them, he called out every favor he could. My dad funded my campaign because Pops had it like that.
Yeah.
We almost got a divorce. He was like, door to door, door to door, door to door, door to door every night. And I had like a 10-month-old son.
He wanted you knocking door to door.
every night. And I had a 10-month-old son, so I had to get a basket and put him in there. And then I would go door to door knocking on doors. And by the time the campaign came to a close, every time my son saw that thing, he'd just start screaming because he hated it. Because we were out all day long and I wasn't paying attention to it. He was just a prop, going around. But I won by 6 votes. So every time he yelled at me about not doing my job, every time he told me I was too lackadaisical, I owe him.
Yeah.
Because he set me up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And of course, the recount was very contentious because on election night, I won by 1 vote. Yeah. And then a recount said 3. And so they had everybody come in on the 3rd recount. And the other guy that was there, he had his guys with him and the other guy's elections. And I looked at Eric and he says, "You don't want to go, do you?" I said, "Absolutely not. I am not interested in any aggressive, male-dominated, who you guys are going to fight over, what Chad." They still had Chads, the hanging Chads back then. "I'm not going." He said, "I wouldn't let you if you wanted to." He took his buddies, went down there, and apparently got a little aggressive, But at the end of the day, I won by 6 votes. He did that.
How much did that change your life?
100%. I mean, 1,000%. First of all, I loved being a judge. Absolutely, positively adored it. Yeah. Had fun, had a good time. I couldn't get in early enough. I started programs. I can't help you if you're an 18-year-old girl with 3 kids and no high school diploma and you stealing. Yeah. Nothing I can do is going to help you. Yeah. Nothing. So what I decided to do was go out to a breakout school where there were a bunch of young girls that are in trouble, 12, 13, 14. And it took me years to figure out just what size group I could handle. I could handle about 7 of them. Okay. Because they were wild and out. And I would come every week. "Where are your grades? You went out with him again? You don't need that guy." "Well, what did he say to you?" And one day I walked around and I just hugged one young lady. And then I went, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even ask permission because I'm a hugger." Yeah. And she said, "Nobody else does." That's sad. So I kept it. I kept it. And I would have a girl, she put somebody through a locker, and they called me, and I left the bench, and I came over there, and I was talking to her, like, "What's up, what's up, what's up?" And she said, "I got raped by another one of my mother's boyfriends. This is the 2nd time. So I called my dad to see if I could go live with him." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Since it happened to you twice, you were the problem. You cannot come with me." Her mother was the problem. Those guys were the problem. Yeah. She was 15. She lived there. They weren't taking care of her. But he didn't want to be bothered. So he blamed her, and it went through her like a knife. And, we sat a long time, and we talked. When we got close, I went to her house. We would go do stuff. If she got good grades, actually for all of them, I would either buy them flowers or take them out to lunch, give them lives. Like, "I'm just interested in what you're doing." Yeah. And they didn't have that. And I was just there like Mama Junior. And
how'd she land?
Interestingly enough, a couple of years later, she calls me at 11 o'clock at night and said, "My cousin just killed somebody and he's here. He wants me to let him in. And I love him and he's all I really have and I just don't know." And I said, "Well, first of all, it's 11 o'clock at night. You called the judge and she answered. So he isn't all you have." That's number 1. And number 2 is do not let him in. It's not. Tell him to turn himself in. You can't save him. All you can do is go to prison with him. Yeah. Don't let him in. Tell him you love him. But I just talked to a judge. There's the only thing you can do is let him in. And I had one other girl. Can I tell you one more story? Oh, yeah,
please.
Yeah, you give me here, stop me talking. You were going to have to
I got plenty of tape.
Drag me out of here. But another young lady, and I didn't remember her at all. Yeah. And like maybe 6, 7 years ago, I'm at the house and I get a knock on the door at the house here in Phoenix. And I open the door and it's this young lady and she said, "Oh my God, it is you." And I said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I used to be one of your girls in Cleveland Heights."
Wow.
Woman talk. I called it woman talk. And she goes, "Can I talk to you?" So I said, "Yeah." I didn't know her, so I didn't let her in the house. I sat outside with her. And she told me the story about her husband, who was abusive. She's got 3 kids with him. Not only does she have a restraining order on him, his side chick had a restraining order on him. He was that abusive. So she was getting ready to go. She done called her mama. She was getting ready to go, and the guy says, "Well, I'll let you have that job," because she had wanted a job and he didn't want her to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "You know what that is? He's just trying to give you a little bit so you won't go, and then he's going to give you hell about having that job, and you're going to be right back where you were. What does your mother want you to do?" And she said, "Come home." And I said, "Why did you come and ask me?" And she goes, "I don't know." I said, "Yeah, you do. Because you know I'm going to tell you the same thing your mama told you. And you needed enough to get up and get on that plane, and I'm telling you, go."
Yeah.
I'm just telling you to go.
You know, that's 2 types of support systems we've just talked about, right?
Explain that to me.
Let me tell you what I mean. It's like, in the beginning of our discussion, you talked about your dad, being a support system and a driving force,
Right.
and believing in you. And then you talked about your husband being a support system and a driving force and believing in you. And now you're that for other women, which has been helpful for them.
Yes.
How do we, but then they still had people in their life that were bringing them down, right? And that's based on a lot of things, really, like in your youth, not having the right support systems, it's like, how do you tell somebody out there right now? It's like, especially, and maybe it's not fair to say this, it's like, it seems to be the demise of women quite often is the man.
The number 1 cause of death amongst pregnant women is the dude that did it to them. They kill them because it's a loss of control. And, when they gave us lethality charts for domestic violence on our bench. And if he says any of the following things, he's going to kill himself. He knows she's going to leave. She's pregnant. You can anything that makes him seem like he's going to lose control. We know how lethal we can guess how lethal he's going to be. And then I used to have domestic violence agencies in the courtroom on my DV days because what happens is the woman will fall through the cracks because she does this. I put him out of the house. It's 2 weeks. It gets better, da-da-da-da, and then he kind of eases his way back in. And I get the domestic violence groups on them right away so they have a source. They may go back.
Yeah.
But even if it gets funky again, they've got source, process, and procedure.
And that's what's just so crazy to me. It's like you can have the partner that pushes you to get that one extra vote and knock on the door and change your life, or you can choose the partner that's going to ruin your life, possibly do something horrible to you. It's like, what's your advice for young women on how to make that choice?
My thing was you gotta know them at least for a few years.
Yeah.
Because you gotta see them when they're down, when they're out, when they're sick, when they're tired. You gotta date them long enough so they can't, send their representative in anymore.
Yeah.
Like I can look like this cute every once in a while.
Sure.
But mostly I look pretty jacked up. but if you live with me long enough, jacked up is what you'll see. And you have to see them sick. You have to see them angry. You got to watch the way they talk to the women in their family. You got to watch the way they talk about the other women in their lives. Do they blame do they blame others for their own errors? That is a huge central red flag for potential viewers. And then you have to ask yourself, what are the 5 things I really don't like about him? And if you don't know 5 things you don't like about him, you don't know him well enough, because there's 5 things not to like about everybody. And then you have to decide, A, is it something that can accelerate? And B, if it stays the way it is, can I live with it long term? So if it's a temper, those things can accelerate.
Yeah.
And you got to see who he gets mad at and how mad he gets and what makes him angry. And if he cannot blame himself for his own mistakes, he's a guy to run from. Also, too much too soon. He meets you Monday, you date on Tuesday, he can't live without you on Wednesday, you got a problem on Thursday. Because that rapid, I got to be with you, and I got to have you, and I got to see where you are. It sounds romantic in the beginning, but it's really like uber controlling.
I think actually that's such amazing advice and insight. And, you know, it's like, predominantly what I do here is I try to teach business, you know, to people that don't have the rich uncle to teach that to them. And so people are like, well, Tyler, we're talking about relationships today. But no, we're not. We're talking about support systems. And, you know, there's nobody out there that right now, you know, you can talk about a board of directors. If you have a huge company, the people on the board are supposed to be the best at their arena in guiding the company and helping the CEO make decisions. Or we talk about like the 5 people in your life, who are the top 5 people in your life, and I'll show you who you are, you know, sort of thing. Why don't we analyze your partner enough? You know?
Yeah, because we're analyzing it based on all the wrong things.
Yeah.
You know, at first we analyzed based just if you look good.
Yeah.
You know, which was back in the day. I mean, I'm 65 now, but back in the day, I didn't look too bad.
You still got to judge.
And you guys would overlook a lot of crazy because they just looking at you. You know what I mean? You overlook a lot of crazy. But, you know, I like tall dudes. I vowed never to marry a guy under 6 feet. Now, that is superficial, except if your daddy's 5'2", you're 5'1", your sister's 4'10", and your grandmother is 4'8".
Yeah.
If I had sons, I had to give them a shot at something. But we're looking, and especially these days, and I don't know, it's a lot in black dating world, and I don't know if it's like this in the white dating world.
I don't know much about dating in general, but let's go there.
Me either. I was married for 30 something. I haven't dated since 1986, so you know I don't know anything.
I don't generally give dating advice on this show.
It's like, you know, but it's all about, are you high value? Are you an alpha male? Are you a beta male? Are you, what kind of, you know, it's really just a contract. What do you bring to the table? What do you bring to the table? It's gotten very superficial. They had this guy named Kevin Samuels, and he used to give this, you just tell women, you're too fat, you'll never get anybody. It's become very adversarial, at least in some areas of the black community. But I even talk to my sons and other people, and they're not looking for what we were looking for.
Yeah.
They want value, and I wanted companionship. I think. I'm not sure.
So now we're logical enough to think value. But are we also, like, just because we have somebody that's valued high, does it mean they're the greatest support system? I love that your analogy came out today is like getting the extra vote because your husband helped you. Right, pushed you, supported you.
Yes.
You know, it's like we're undervaluing that, like the good support system. That doesn't mean she has to be the CEO of a major company to have value.
Right.
You know, it's like there's not, and that's why I really wanted to hit this home a little bit, is because, you know, it's like that support system can drive you to unparalleled new things, can drive you to be a judge.
There is an almost 100-year-long longitudinal study that bears that out. It's I think it's the Glick study from Harvard. It started in 1938. And in 1938, you know, Madison Grant and Hitler and everybody all out there trying to, we want to separate everything by race.
Yeah.
You know? And not only white good, black bad. It was like the Teutonic blue-eyed, blonde-haired, then the middle Alpines, and then the Mediterranean whites.
Yeah.
So you're going to do those, and they had all of these ideas. And so they were doing a study in 1938, and they thought that who you were genetically or your race determined how well you did. So they took a bunch of Harvard cats and they took a bunch of poor guys from Boston and they started following them throughout their lives. I mean, and they were testing their head size. As years went on, they gave them MRIs, CTs, studied them every week, just doom to doom to doom. Then they started adding women and blah 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 blah. And there were 5 other studies that started based on that. And the one thing they found, more than anything else, that predicted was long, healthy life and happiness and even better health and wellness, was the number and the depth of meaningful relationships you had in your life, above everything, above your parents' money, above your schooling, above your intellect. And they were all, and it was not like, it wasn't close. It wasn't, it's a little bit beyond anything. It was that.
There's a great documentary called Happy that basically backs that up entirely too, and it has everything to do with like family unity, like feeling like belonged, feeling supported, it's like, that's why if you get one thing out of this show today, it's like, make sure you have close connections, but vet those close connections,
and make sure they're meaningful.
Yeah.
And, we do so much time on the internet now, we are aggregating everybody else's angst by watching their sad stories, and then we're trying to prove a point, well, I'm high value and I can get this guy and that guy, and they call this the anxious generation, and that's part of the reason why they're so upset and anxious. They're comparing what kind I got, how good I got, how much money I got, how pretty I am, and is my guy an alpha guy, and I don't date guys with under $100,000. My husband had 4 kids from his first wife. He had no money, but he loved me.
Yeah.
And look, I made more money now because I made a guy who made less than I did and was never going to make as much as I did. But he and I ended up doing quite well because he was the brother I needed.
Yeah.
He couldn't have done it without me, and I couldn't have done it without him. That's when you've hit the jackpot.
I know 2 guys in particular, and their wives are about the most supportive people I've ever seen, and it's like they have their own stuff going on. That's not to diminish their role.
Right.
It's like, but they are like, their husbands are almost their hero. They're the ones out there, like any second they get, they're bragging about, you can't brag for yourself that way. It's like they're bragging about them. They're making them believe that they can do more. And these are the people that I've seen go the furthest.
Yep.
Is that like support system? It's unbelievable what it's done for them.
Unbelievable. And it's everything. It's everything. I wasn't going to go TV. They called me, do you want to do a TV show? Heck no.
Yeah.
Why'd you say no?
Yeah.
Nobody believe,
That's when you need that. It's like that voice, and that is your board of directors and one person that you care about more than anybody on the planet. And if that person is a bad advisor or trying to bring you down, or you can't do it,
you are in trouble.
Yeah.
But if this cat, he says, you're the only person who doesn't know how smart you are. He used to say that to me.
I would agree with that statement.
And I said, yeah, but because I've been around people who can really think. I mean, there were some people at Harvard that were like, just blow your mind. But anyway.
It's always the people with the most to offer the world that are the greatest people that always have imposter syndrome. That's what I find over and over again.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. It's like the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's because people know so little, they think the little that they know is all that there is to know because they don't know the entire scope of it.
Yeah.
I know a lot of different things, but I also know a lot of different people who know so much more than I do, and I know all the books that I haven't read, and I just, I feel like I'm faking it all the time.
It's a problem I've had because I've always been this little business guy. Open these little business companies, and and these days I'll get asked to go into some pretty big companies. And at first, until I actually get in the mindset where I'm just now job focused. At first, it's overwhelming. It's like, here I am, this little guy, this little fish, and
what am I doing?
Yeah, what am I doing here? Why me? Yeah. I'm not a CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Right.
That sort of. And then I'll find something that no big accounting firm in the entire country had found.
Right.
And then it's like, so why were you being so hard on yourself?
Exactly.
It's like we all have talents, and I find that some of the most talented people I know don't know the amount of talents they have.
I think that's very, very true. I think that is very, very true. And I think that what the culture celebrates as talent is not necessarily the talents that we should value. I know some people that are so chill and glacial and kind and loving. I think that has great, tremendous value.
Yeah.
I
do
just
too.
you can't upset them.
Yeah.
You can't get them excited. That has value. Could you imagine if that was able to trickle out in the world that we're living in now, where people are getting shot?
You've been watching my videos, Judge?
This
is exactly how I feel. Can you imagine if we rewarded the world based on kindness?
Yeah.
The kindest human on the planet was the most popular person. You know, it's like anger is a strong, powerful tool, in my opinion, but the expression of anger in any way is a weakness.
My mother used to say, when you get mad, you lose.
Yeah.
And anger is often an able imposter. It's more like fear and frustration, all dressed up in military garb, impersonating power.
Sure.
It's not really power. It's you've lost control.
Yeah.
What does the Bible said? Anger is like a city broken into and left without walls. I have this huge thing about, you can be angry.
Yeah.
But to what extent and to whom and when and how can you stop? And is it sometimes you have to get angry when it's dog came up. I get mad.
Yeah.
Chase it.
Yeah.
Because that's how you do. You can't beat it. I get mad, but you can't control it. Often when people get angry, they have simply lost control as opposed to being regimented about it.
Look at how explosive gasoline is, right?
Yes.
It's a powerful tool, right? It can drive an ambulance and save somebody's life. It can light somebody's house on fire. Right? It's like that, to me, is what anger can do too. If you're a little angry, this is just my opinion. I'm not a psychologist. It's like I use anger all the time, but I use it in the gym.
Right.
I use it to get some frustrations out. I use it to drive myself. I use it to wake myself up at 3 o'clock in the morning and get some more work done. I use anger productively, and I think that's okay. But yes, the expression of anger, nobody has the right to take anger out on somebody else.
Not at all. And it never helps.
No.
No one says, oh, you're really yelling at me. You must be right. No one does that. It often is off-putting. I figured this out. My mother told me this one time I was on a bench. Oh, I think I told in another podcast. I shouldn't say it again, huh?
You can say it.
Okay. So my mother was here.
Yeah.
Was watching me sentence people, and I yelled at this domestic violence guy. And blah, 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 sent him home. And she came back in the back afterwards. She says, let me tell you what you did wrong. And I said, what did I do wrong? He said, now that dude is thinking now about that bitch he hit and that other bitch that sent him to jail. You just pissed him off more and you didn't do anything about it. He said, what you should have done is talk to him about what happened from his point of view. And then you should have walked him into what he should have done and then told him why he was going to jail and how he can avoid it next time. I started using that. I said, what'd she do? She said, it annoyed you, didn't it? And she kept talking, didn't she? It kept talking, didn't she? And I said, now let me tell you what went wrong, where you went wrong. And by the time you're done, they're smiling. And I said, so you going to jail, right? Yeah, I get it. Now, I didn't change him. I didn't make him an abuser, but I didn't make him matter.
Yeah.
And I planted a seed. And one of those seeds actually grew, actually a few, because, whenever you're a judge and you get a letter in pencil, it's from prison. Because they don't give them pens. Okay? And you open them. And he said, I heard what you said, and I just don't want you to believe I didn't hear you. And he wrote me a long letter about how he got the way he was, but he says, I just don't want you to think badly of me, and I want you to know that I thought about what you said.
Look at the difference. And actually, I do remember, I think I saw that on a podcast, and we have a podcast for bullied kids.
Oh, okay.
And it's amazing, one thing, I always worked in really low-level jobs when I was a kid, and, I never have been able to tolerate the abuse of, the low-level worker, right? The person, and sorry, it's low-level is a bad term, but I had these jobs too. You know, it's like ringing up your groceries, and then you see the person screaming at the person ringing up the groceries, and honestly, it's that person. You know, it's not the grocery ringer. You know, and so I don't have a big tolerance for this, and so I will, like, I'm pretty even demeanor, but I will step in and say that's not right. You know, in these scenarios. But through my bully podcast, like, it was interesting. You know, I've always kind of been like that. And I happened to be at a protein store, you know, and I'm watching this guy as I walk into the protein store. They're making these drinks, and he's screaming at the kid behind the counter. And, you know, I had learned a lot about, like, trying to deal with these situations from dealing with the Pulley podcast. And usually I would have just said something like, hey, dude, not right, you know, or whatever. And so, like, what I learned about was this, like, third party of reason, so to speak. And, you know, like, the sheepdog is actually one of the ways we term it. That's the person that's kind of the even in the middle, watching out for people, you know, like, protecting kind of thing. And so I decided I'm not just going to confront the guy. What I'm going to do is, he's mad because, like, apparently made this shake wrong, you know? And so I'm like, I'll tell you what, how much did the shake cost? And he's like, $6. Here's the $6. So now he leaves, and you can tell he feels super sheepish, you know, and he's not mad at me because I didn't yell at him.
You didn't do
and
anything.
He's not mad at the kid behind the counter anymore because he's realized he's being a jerk. The guy comes up to me that was in line. He goes, thank you so much, because I was going to have to punch that guy in the face. The kid from the behind the counter goes, thank you so much, because I couldn't say anything, you know, and that came from, if I had confronted the guy and said something, he would have left angry. Instead, he left, and that's what your story reminded me of so much, and that's why I'm trying to back it up, is because you went at it in a way that, like, changed him to the point he would write a letter to you.
Right. And just made him think.
Yeah, I think that guy probably left thinking, hey, you know, I probably shouldn't have been that much of a jerk.
Right. Yeah, it puts it in perspective. But if you meet them where they live, they think that they're right, and they're going to fight you and all that kind of stuff. And if you meet them someplace else, you start where they are, and you slowly walk them home. Oh, I know you upset. I said, but... You know, you upset about that. You know, just, it ain't that serious, people. It just isn't.
You know, something interesting to me that's dawned on me through this conversation is, like, you're like, I made the mistake around medicine. You know, it's like, but I don't think you've realized the amount of people you've been able to impact from the role you didn't think you wanted.
Yeah, and that's why I call myself an accidental overachiever. I mean, I never was... You know, I was strong about the law and being it, but I loved being a judge, and I thought I was a good judge. I won by 80% of the vote, and when I ran for re-election, because I worked.
No more knocking on doors that time, huh?
No more knocking on doors. It was like, you know, I called every principal of every school, and I said, look, I know what's on the civics test that each level has to pass, and I've made a course for each one, one for elementary, one for junior, and one for high school. And none of the junior high schools didn't do it, but the other ones did. And I sewed up a little robe for them to wear, and I did, and I had them come in and do a trial. They'll never forget what a prosecutor is, or this or that or the other, because they've acted it out. And it was just a way to become a part of the community, because I believe, you know, as a judge, you just doing mop up. It's too little, too late. Yeah. You ain't fixing, you ain't helping nobody. You are getting, you know, domestic violence people put away, putting away dangerous people and stuff, but the damage has already been done. And I would like to be able to, you know, stop the damage before it happens. And you can't do it from up there.
Can people change?
They can. It's very, very difficult. They have to have a very, very good reason to do so. I've seen it. I've seen it. I had a young lady. I must have had a bad day, because I was at the grocery store buying chocolate cake.
That's what I do too.
I was at the bakery with chocolate cake, and this lady came up to me, and she had a little girl in her hand, and she says, "Hi, Judge." I said, "Hi," and she says, "I know you don't know me, but 3 years ago, when she was a baby in my arms, I had a domestic violence case, and you called us both up. And you talked to us for a really, really long time. And you talked to him for a long time. Then you made him do a program. And she goes, things aren't perfect, but they are 80% better.
Wow.
And I want to say thank you.
No kidding.
Still bought the cupcake, but
Yeah.
but that made my day.
That, I tell people all the time, because then like they get into podcasting and things like that. And, and they'll ask me, because it's like, well, you're usually not going to have an overnight success show. You're going to have to put time in. And it's like, we don't realize, it's like when you see those little click counts on Instagram and things like that, those are people. Right? It's like, so somebody will be like, oh, I only got 100 views or something like that. That's 100 people. That's 100 people. And I know you had to have gotten this too. I've gotten messages before that said, you said something last week and that's the reason I'm still on this planet today. It's like, I think we highly undervalue the impact of having one person.
One person. And my one person is Ruthie.
Yeah.
And she did, and I remember she was following me, and she said something really mean to me at one point. And we kind of got into it, and then we worked through it, and then she bought my book, My Mother's Rules.
Okay.
And then we've been buddies ever since.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She was like, I guess the bus ticket was the bus ticket. I guess that was a suicide concept or group. Let's buy our bus tickets and go. And she says, I was getting the bus ticket. And your book made me not do that.
Gosh.
And now when she's upset about something, she always emails me, and I just help her out. And I love her. She's so sweet.
Yeah.
So.
See, even if you wrote the book for no other reason than that, how worth it is.
How worth it was it, right?
There's so many people out there sitting there right now, and it's like, well, I didn't make that video because it's only going to get 10 hits. Or I didn't write that book because, it's not going to sell 1 million copies. Or I'm afraid to start the business because I don't know what I'm doing or whatever. And it's like, people need to work in the micro first.
Right.
If you work in the micro, that one person, that one thought, that one instinct, that one thing that you're going to do, the bigger approach comes, in my opinion.
Right. The funny thing about that book is, when I left the bench to do TV, my first show was called Power of Attorney. It only lasted 4 months.
Okay.
And, I had a 6-year term, and my husband said, well, what you should ask for in negotiations is you want them to pay out your 6-year term if the show goes away. And I said, I cannot do that. And, my husband, yeah, you can. Do it. And they did.
Yeah.
So I spent 5 years at home. The show lasted 4 months, and I spent 5 years at home collecting from Fox what I would have been paid.
Wow.
My judicial salary. So that's when I wrote that book.
Uh-huh.
And the only reason I wrote it is because I wanted my mother to know how much she influenced me and how what she told me authored my best moments on the bench.
That's beautiful.
And so I took it, and the rules and the thing, and it was called My Mother's Rules. And I did it for her, and I did it because I just wanted it published.
Yeah.
I didn't want anybody I didn't care if
Yeah.
anybody bought it. Because I was just a check at home. And somebody did me a favor, I got rejected 57 times from 57 publishers.
Crazy.
And a buddy of mine he had a publisher friend, a small independent thing. He got it to take it. He took it. He blah, 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 blah. And he said once I went on TV, that book saved his business.
Wow.
Because I sold so many from that, doing something I had never intended to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it just happened to be there. So.
Did your mom ever get to read the book?
She never read the book.
She knew existed.
She knew it. Oh, yeah,
Okay.
She knew it existed. I've read her bits and pieces of it.
Okay.
But she can't.
Because why?
It's too...
She has imposter syndrome too.
No, she lived it.
Yeah.
We had it. My father, though brilliant and loving and caring, was bipolar.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of work.
Sure.
And there was a lot of stress behind it and a lot of difficulty. And I talked about all that in the book.
Yeah.
And how she used to have to manage him. I remember, if he got mad, and we had to run out of the house.
Yeah.
We used to go to the drive-in movies.
Yeah.
'Cause that was back in the day.
Yeah.
We always had blankets and pillows in the car. And then we would come back home and we'd walk around the side of my house. Mom would put me on her shoulders and I would look in. And if he was in bed, we could go in. If he wasn't there, we had to find someplace else to go. That's how our lives were for years.
Wow.
And he was a good man.
Yeah.
God made him crazy. He didn't choose that.
Yeah.
You know, and he didn't feel good about it. And he didn't have any medication. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Because people say things about him when I say that about him, and it makes me angry.
Well, and this is before we were probably learning to diagnose some of this
Yeah,
stuff too,
you know,
right?
but you just saying, you know, I said something about him on the Breakfast Club, and people say she doesn't know she was in an abusive relationship. I know who I was, and I know where I was. I was there.
Yeah.
And I'm not stupid. So, and I forgot what I was talking about. I got so mad about people talking about my daddy.
We were talking about Mom's book.
Oh, yeah. So she just really, really couldn't read it. And like a couple of Christmases before she died, I did a 7-volume picture book of her life. And it took her 2 months before she could read it because it was just, she'd lived a lot.
No kidding.
And she's one of the most loving, genuinely kind people that I've ever met. And she did what she did. She loved him throughout. He had a couple of strokes towards the end that was her God stroke, because for the last 5 years of life, he was just pleasant.
Huh.
Because of the stroke hit him somewhere in his brain.
Wow.
And he was just cool.
Huh.
He laughing.
No kidding.
Yeah, 5 years. He couldn't work, but they would go out and get Dairy Queen, and you know, she got her reward.
You know, that's one of the bigger things that I worry about these days is like the older generation doesn't really know how to use the camera, you know? And that's where all of the wisdom is, right? It's like you took all that wisdom and you put it into a book. Otherwise, your mom's wisdom would have been
gone.
Yeah. And that's why it's like, you know, when you think about your podcast and stuff like that, I hope you think a little bit more about like, this is wisdom that needs to be in the world. You know, there's a 20-year-old kid that's making a bunch of content out there right now. Mm-hmm. There's a 20-year-old kid right now that's teaching people about life, and all the wisdom is being lost because the older generation doesn't know how to use the camera, you know?
Wow.
And when you think about it that way, it's like I implore more people to share. I implore more people to write.
Right.
I implore more wisdom to be put out there in the world, because it's like, you know, let's face it, when I was 20 years old, when you were 20 years old, we were probably not handing out the best advice.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Oh, listen, if I met my 20-year-old self today, I probably wouldn't even like her.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that chick was crazy.
Oh,
And
I think about
you know, she did some stuff that
Yeah.
I could not appreciate. And the other reason that is so important is that there is so much disinformation out now. I mean, you with AI and you know, and all these, and if you watch TikTok, they'll have somebody explaining something, and you realize they don't know what they're talking about.
Totally.
Or they don't, or there's a voiceover. I mean, you can't trust anything anymore.
This is one of the reasons I started this podcast and started doing a social media, because like fitness is a passion of mine. I have a degree in biochemistry, you know, like I've backed that up with that, you know, like business is a passion of mine. I have an MBA and years in business, you know, it's like, and when I would get online, I know a lot about these topics. I would see things that were in fitness that were dangerous and unfair and not true. In business, unfair, untrue, will get you sued, get you audited, you know, all these different things. And it's like, more people need to be just out there, like actually giving good knowledge.
Good information,
Yeah.
not their advice. But the problem is all that ratchetness is more fun.
You ain't kidding. And then here's the biggest problem. There's more of it out there than there ever has. And so in some ways, that's such a good thing. You know, it's like you're not starting from zero, but you could be starting from negative. Because if you hear the wrong advice, that's going to start you backwards.
And not only that, there are, you know, stupid is no longer locally contained. Remember when you used to get in trouble with the people around your house because those are the only people you were dealing with. And people just who had your phone number. Now you can act a fool with somebody in Austria, Australia, you know, everywhere. And there's enough people with bad ideas You know, when you have a bad idea in a community and nobody else agrees with you, you're limited in how much damage you can do. But now we can group up.
Yeah, we
don't
can
have
find
any
somebody
borders.
else with the same bad idea.
Same bad ideas, and we aggregate them, and then you create a little, you create that echo chamber, and it gets louder and louder and louder and louder, and you believe more and more and more about what's in there and less about anything that's out there. And it's, I used to wonder how the Dark Ages happened.
Yeah.
How did we lose all that knowledge? I mean,
no kidding.
The Arabs had the skies all mapped out.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, we're burning witches and this, that, and the other thing. And I read a couple of books on it, and I was like, okay, I get it. But woo, I'm afraid of the deep stupid that is happening based on all the, flat Earth, and the moon landing didn't happen, and I don't know.
And they're finding those crowds that believe the same thing that are now bolstering that in their mind. And
if they have evidence, and they have, the fact that when there's a solar eclipse, it doesn't look like this, means the world ain't flat, but okay.
And that's what I think it's hard for the younger generation now. It's like, how do you vet it, right? If there seems to be a convincing video out there, and it's usually the salacious one too, the one that's like, it's a fun one, right? Because nobody wants to hear that business is hard, life is hard, choose a partner not based on the, like the beautiful blonde flowing hair.
You're going to have to grind for 10 years before you get what you want.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it today.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to. And then, Walter Cronkite, you could trust that dude.
Yeah.
Because only one dude could have that job. There were 3 guys that had those jobs on 3 networks.
Yeah. And
you had to be vetted, you had to be good, you had to report. Now, anybody with a platform and an opinion could claim they're an expert. And it's frightening to me.
It's absolutely frightening. When I first started helping businesses do a lot of pro bono consulting, it was more like they just didn't know. Right? Just like me when I first started. Right. Didn't know, like weren't totally aware of accounting, marketing, that sort of stuff. It was just they didn't know. They needed some help in that direction. Now, it's actually the biggest problem I see is they're aware enough to know they need help. The problem is they don't know who to get help from. Yep. And most of the time when they're getting help from somebody, it's a nefarious being that doesn't know what they're doing and charging them a bunch of money. Right. And it's taking them actually backwards.
Right.
That is the biggest problem, I think, in society today is like, if you don't know anything about the subject, it's very easy to get taken advantage of.
And the thing that is trippy to me is if I hear something really interesting, I go find a book on it.
Yeah.
And I find a couple. I have to read a minimum of 3 on any subject. Especially if it's a controversial subject.
Smart, yeah.
One from the left, one from the right, left, and one from someone who claims they're objective.
Yeah.
And then I tie together the threads that make it all the way through all the books and try to figure it out. But people don't want to read a book no more.
Folks, and that's the way you should do it. It's like you find one side, you find the other side, you find supposedly the middle guy.
Right, and then you just, you just keep,
yeah.
And you don't know when you've collected, you've seen it all. You're so, everybody has the ability to see what's in front of them and what they're immersed in.
Yeah.
So a community think all women are A, B, and C. No, it's the women on your block that are A, B, and C.
Sure.
All of the women on your block happen to be A, B, and C.
Yeah.
But all women aren't A, B, and C.
I read a stat recently that only 10% of the men on dating apps are actually the ones getting dates. And so the other 90% aren't even able to get a date. So all the women are saying, oh, we only deal with these jerk, guys that are womanizing and stuff like that. But they're only dating the 10%. They're all dating the same guy, basically.
Right. And he can do anything he wants to.
Sure.
Because he's getting another date every night.
Yeah.
Every night.
And I know we focused a little bit today on relationships because I think it's so important. It's something I think a lot about these days. It's like that partner in somebody's life, man, woman, whatever, it doesn't matter, husband, wife, it's like that partner I've noticed is like the key to so much success.
Yeah, it is. And the key to being happy.
That too.
I think part of the thing is we have so many images of success that we are bombarded with on a daily basis because of this, and everybody's taking pictures and putting filters on and blah 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 and gorgeous, and you're chasing that thing which doesn't make you happy. But that studies that show the thing that makes you happy is when the screen is off and when you sitting down with somebody you care about and y'all just shooting a breeze. That will make you happy when you have that. Or I know my husband are going to go out and I are going to have a cup of coffee in the front yard every morning. That is success.
We never know how good a moment is in that moment. And that's the saddest part about it.
Sad.
It's only in reflection. And I bring this up sometimes, but I want to bolster your point a little bit. You know, it's like, did you ever see that movie Happy Gilmore?
I know it is, with the guy with the...
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but I know.
There's this part so to be good at putting, the guys, his coach is always telling him, think of your happy place. What's your happy place look like? Imagine that. And if you watch the show, you've heard me say this before. But so think of your happy place, right? And then he thinks of like beautiful woman bringing him beer, and he loved his grandma, so his grandma's there happy, right? That's his happy place. And I tell people now, do that, but think of your success, right? Close your eyes right now. What does success look like for you, right? And if you're picturing the Ferrari, the big house, if you didn't picture once the family member, the cup of coffee, it's like you've actually been sold the marketing image of success.
That's right.
And life and success, in my opinion, is all about alignment. You have to direct all these multiple things to alignment towards a goal, right?
Absolutely.
So now let's say your version of success is that. All life is now driven towards that, and you missed all the stuff that was the happiness, the real success, the real
joy,
change.
Going out playing pickleball. I remember I had a horrible part in life where difficulties in my family were going on, and I started playing tennis 6 to 10 hours a week, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah.
I could hit the ball, and my tennis teacher, she was a mother too, so we would talk, and then we would hit the ball some more and hit the ball some more. That was wonderful, just to be able to. That was the joy of my life. I'm not going to play tennis professionally.
Sure.
But I'm hitting that ball, and
Yeah.
I'm running, and it's sunny outside, and she and I laugh a lot, So that's what life is. Life is not, it's not,
That's where I think we get lost sometimes. But
being
then
a boss bitch or anything.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's where we see the social media post that has the guy in the Ferrari, and we figure he has it all, And it's like, and yes, have the Ferrari, have your success. If your success have given you the Ferrari and you got there and that's what you wanted,
God bless
great,
you.
enjoy it, But don't just drive towards those things. Realize there's more in life. Like the judge is saying, a cup of coffee with your partner and somebody you care about and somebody that's went through thick and thin and pushed you to get the extra vote.
Or I would say something. I would say something to him. I come in and say, "You know what happened today, baby? What?" And I said, and I said, He goes, "Did you get excited about it?" I said, "No." And he goes, "You have evolved." I said, "Haven't I?" You have evolved.
Oh, I super enjoyed the conversation, as I always do. We're going to have to come back again at some point on another topic, because I just think you're so good for the underdogs. I really do. I think what you do is amazing. Yeah. I think who you are is amazing. And I think
both my parents were big-time underdogs.
Yeah.
And turned that into big-time success. I mean, she was born in 1930, spent time in an orphanage because her mother couldn't feed her.
Wow.
Father was, didn't have an inside toilet until he went to, you know what I mean?
It's amazing.
And they have a daughter. One is a board-certified neurologist, and another one, well, she's retired now. She ain't working, but she was a judge at one point. She did okay.
She did great. Both of you guys did amazing.
Yeah, so.
No, you guys, you're a true success story, Judge, and I know your heart, and I love giving people with a good heart, part of my platform, I think part of my mission these days is to help good, amazing people promote their voice even more.
Yeah, and you're good at it too, because truth be told, I've been dragging my feet on my podcast, and my man here is not letting it happen.
No.
And I appreciate it.
Your voice is too good for the world. You're helping too many people. Like I'm here to push you into it. And so we're gonna come back next time. Guys, I'm gonna have you back again, folks, and we're gonna talk about next time victim mentality.
Okay, cool.
Because I think it's so important. You know, it's like, look at what your dad was able to do. Look at what your mom was able to do.
And I will tell you a great story about when I tried to be a victim once, and they wouldn't let me.
You're going to have to stay tuned to that, folks. And once again, thank you for joining me for another episode of Underdogs, Bootstrappers, Game Changers. Judge Lynn, she's got Feeling on Purpose, an amazing podcast, which she's going to continue to do every other week. And we'll be back soon. Thanks for waiting.
Bye.
Hello and welcome to Initiative. All the proceeds from the monetization of this podcast will go to charitable causes. It's for the person that wants it.